Today's topic is water. I'll tell you, it's my favorite topic. So I look forward to this. I went through the Texas Water Specialist training with Terry MacArthur, who's our lead presenter today. She's going to enlist all of your help. If you've ever been to a Terry MacArthur session, you don't just listen. So, and typically you don't just sit. And both of those are good things for what we're doing. That's here. Terry has a lot of educational experience. I'll let her, she wants to share that. She also has an incredible amount of practical experience. And I've had a very hard time ever stumping her on any question that's here. If I did, she found a way to turn it around and make me go find the answer. So that's a mark of a good instructor right there. I'm going to let Terry get started. No slides today. Again, it's almost a technology-free today. I will find some markers and we'll be using the whiteboard for a little bit, but that's about as much technology as you're going to see of this kind. We'll be doing a lot of science today, however. So if you did some last week, if you were at her water specialist training last week, you've done what we're going to do. So we're going to enlist you. You're going to be the initial expert.
Don't warn them in advance.
Yeah, you think they'll slip out? All right, Terry, it is all yours.
So, first up on the agenda, we're supposed to talk about the Texas Water Specialist Program. It's a Texas Parks and Wildlife program. Somebody tell me what Texas Parks and Wildlife has to do with water. I'll wait.
A lot.
Okay, a lot. What has Texas Parks and Wildlife to do with water?
Water touches everything.
Water touches everything, but anybody more specific?
A lot of the ecosystems within Texas are based around water, like marshlands.
Okay, so there are a lot of water-specific ecosystems, but Parks and Wildlife. Parks and Wildlife.
Fish and there's do they related to taking care of fish?
Okay, I want a show of hands and don't lie. How many of you actually read chapters 9 and 18 in the manual?
Does half count?
You know, like, and but I have to confess, when I got to the parts about all the different
Agencies?
I kind of glazed over.
Okay,
Got a little overwhelmed.
so in case you didn't know, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department is charged by the state of Texas with protecting both the quantity and quality of water available for wildlife. They don't just make sure you have a license to shoot that deer. They have control to a large degree of managing water quality in all 191,000 miles of waterways that are in Texas. Parks and Wildlife is very concerned about, as I said, both quantity and quality of water to serve wildlife in the state. As a result of that, their conservation education program, headed up by Melissa Felty, has developed the Texas Water Specialist Program. This is the curriculum guide. When you attend one of the in-person water labs that I do for this topic, you can pick up one of these. They ship them to me for free. I give them to you for free. The other publication that Melissa works from, and if you've been to one of the Master Naturalist annual meetings and heard her presentation about Texas waters, you know, she also references a lot the Texas Aquatic Science book. The thing of it is I can't give you this free because A&M Press doesn't offer it that way to anybody. So if you want one, pardon all my notes, you see my important topic points here, but if you want one, they're like about $35 at the A&M bookstore. Another free guide that you can order, but I order, a dozen at a time or whatever, is the TCEQ publication, A Guide to Freshwater Ecology. And if you come to an in-person water lab, you can pick up one of these. It is a terrific guide to all things aquatic in freshwater in the state. We reference the material in here quite a lot. And so I have these at the classes that you can pick up once you attend in person. But this publication, well, I'm just gonna say it. Kind of sad to say, it came out in 2017. Have a lot of things changed in the last 8 years, yeah. And as a result, some of the data that's in it, some of the specific numbers that are in it are also a little outdated. But I try to make sure as we reference them that I give you updated information. So that's the curriculum guide for the Texas Water Specialist Program. The program requirements are to achieve initial certification, you must attend 8 hours of training. Now, in addition to the classes that we do here locally, and trust me, not every place has a formal agenda of classes, so this is kind of a boon for you if you want this certification. But you only have to take 8 hours of training, and Parks and Wildlife from January through August every year offers 1 hour webinars once a month. Sadly, the next one coming up that I'm really interested in on freshwater mussels, because many of them are endangered in our state, it is at the same time as our chapter meeting next week. So I registered so I can watch the video of it after the fact. If you just Google Texas Waters with an S specialist, the top thing that you'll see that you can click on takes you to that big page in the Parks and Wildlife setup. And if you scroll down, you'll find a list of this year's webinars. And there's a link to register for the ones that you're interested in. I would encourage you, if you have any interest in aquatic topics, that you take a look at that list. And then if you keep scrolling, the previous year's webinars are there that you can simply view. You can't really count them as training time because you weren't there live. But that's another hour that you can get. It doesn't have to be with the Woodlands Green or Heartwood for it to qualify as a class, as long as it's a well-established organization for water education. Houston Galveston Area Council often offers water-related topics. So there are a number of ways to get those 8 hours. I usually schedule in-person classes sometimes as early as January, but this year there were too many other things going on. But usually January through May. Summertime is a no-go. There's just, people are too busy. This year I scheduled February through May. And in those same months, I also offer 2 hours online once a month, typically on fourth Monday, unless it's a holiday day or something. So there's multiple ways you can get those 8 hours. The in-person classes I do are 3 hours each. The online is 2 hours each. Parks and Wildlife is an hour a month. I mean, combine them any way you want. And at this time, there is no deadline on how long you can spend to get those 8 hours to get your initial certification. Recertification is on a calendar year basis. To recertify year after year, you only need to do volunteer service, 10 hours of water-related volunteer service that you report in, gets you recertified every year. When you initially certify, Parks and Wildlife will send you either, I think they've gone to a PDF format now, so that rather than mailing you a certificate, they email you a PDF of your certificate that you can print if you want. But they also send you a pin that says you are a Texas water specialist. For recertification, Parks and Wildlife will acknowledge that you've recertified, but they don't really do anything for you about it. So way back in 2016, when we started doing this as a chapter, offering this to members, the chapter decided to give us a pin every year when we recertify. So the chapter has been buying pins every year for those who recertify. They are notified by Melissa Felty at Parks and Wildlife. Whoever is the person who receives that notification, I assume it's our VMS person, Melissa Schubert, but they get the list of who all has certified and who all has recertified for that year. And so at the annual meeting, when you've heard people's names called out to get a pin for recertifying, that's what that's about. So as Master Naturalist, you do not have to sign up directly with Texas Parks and Wildlife. Anyone who's over age 18 or over, who is not a Master Naturalist or a Master Naturalist in training, has to sign up directly with Parks and Wildlife. And they report through the same VMS system we do, but directly to Parks and Wildlife. Because it's nearly impossible for anyone who's not 18 to sign up with Parks and Wildlife, I have an agreement of partnership with Melissa Felty that I offer high schoolers, grades 9 through 12 in this region. Any kids that age in this region can come to the water classes or attend the online classes, and they report those hours directly to me into a Woohoo file that I created. And about twice a year, I report those hours directly to Melissa Felty, so that as these kids age out and turn 18, if they want to stay in the program and keep getting recertified, she already has their background hours and knows that they got certified locally. Last year, 2024, I think it was 38 high schoolers who attended classes. And I think it was 19 that got their certification done before the end of the school year of the 38 kids. Some have come back. Some are attending classes now because, as I said, there's not a deadline to get your initial certification. So that's the program in a nutshell. Anybody have questions?
So I think I read online that we can do the chapter tests, and up to an hour worth of reading the chapters goes towards 18. Does that also count towards Texas Water Specialists?
Yes, you do that online at the Texas Water Specialist website. You have to do that online there, because when you log in through that web page, through those portals, she captures who you are. So you want to make sure that you have some way to identify yourself when you log in that is consistent. But yes, she tracks those hours. In fact, when you watch the 1 hour webinars every month, she knows that you were there live. So if you report it and you weren't there live, sorry. Any other questions?
Did you say that we could record reading the chapters?
Online. Yeah, you can go online and you can open the book online in the Texas Water Specialist. And you can read those chapters and they're quizzes. You have to take quizzes. Any other questions? Okay, well, let's move on to water in general. So here we are, master naturalists. How are we going to think about water?
It's a life source.
It is a life source. For whom?
Living creatures.
Every living organism on the earth. Yeah. But how else?
Ways to preserve it for.
So ways to conserve and collect water toward what end? Toward what end? Okay, so, all right. So it's a matter of utilizing rainwater in a way to conserve using the water that comes out of a faucet, say. Yes?
I thought that one interesting aspect is like, where is the water located? Is it located, in the surface? Is it located, in the ground, and the seed, like, exist, flows in, is it available only sometimes of the year, or is it available only, throughout the year or some parts of the year?
And why would you think that's important to know?
But one of that, I found very interesting that depending on where the water is who owns the water, and that includes even the ability to take it and distribute it and use it, and even how well you treat it. Like, do you leave it worse than it was by dumping stuff on it?
Okay, so access to water is an important point.
Mhm.
How else? How are we, Texas Master Naturalists, going to think about water?
Consider how it naturally flows versus how we're disrupting its natural flow process, how that affects us.
That would be a good thing to know. What would you think would be the main point we'd want to know about that? And for those online, if you didn't hear, the question, the comment was, no, understanding the natural flow of water versus managed flow of water. So go ahead.
Which processes are going to promote a situation where we're not going to promote flooding versus allowing the water to do its thing naturally, soak into the ground when it should soak in versus just runoff.
And provide for the plants and the wildlife on the way, instead of just be rushed off somewhere else.
So you're saying that as master naturalists, we might want to promote a better understanding of how development or management can be detrimental to a healthy waterway.
When I think of water, I'm thinking conservation. That's the main word that keeps coming. I'm from San Antonio, and that was such a big deal with the aquifer that, water restrictions, pretty restrictive ones usually, because in Texas, it's never guaranteed that we're going to get rain. I mean, I know that there's averages, but you don't ever really know when you're going to get that rain. We have such high heat, it's always evaporating.
So in your mind, the word conservation conjures up avoiding wasting water.
avoiding wasting water, avoiding polluting the water, being mindful of what we're flushing down our toilets, what we're pouring down our sinks, what we're putting on our yards.
So in your mind, conservation also means protecting waterways. Let's talk about protecting waterways. How can I protect waterways? You touched
Being
on it.
mindful of what you're putting on your yards, how you're treating your yards. I remember in San Antonio, there were a lot of, and I'm sure in Houston it happens too, it was not unusual to see people rinsing out their paint buckets in their yards or down their driveways, just assuming, well, once it's off my property, it's gone, but it's not. That paint residue, it's awful.
So if you did not know this, there are both state and federal laws against putting anything into a storm drain inlet. Anything. When the guy who comes to paint your house cleans out his brushes in the gutter and the water flows down into the storm drain inlet, he's just broken state and federal laws. When you hire the landscaper and he comes and he blows the leaves off your yard and blows them down the gutter into the storm drain inlet, he and you have now broken both state and federal laws. Each carries the potential for a $25,000 fine. And in the case of the federal law, depending on what it is you put down that drain, there's also the potential for jail time.
But if you're fertilizing, over fertilizing, and it washes out through the drainage, but you are not actually, the rain will wash it out. Is that?
It would be very difficult to prove that you applied excess chemicals to your yard, that the rainfall washed into the storm drain and polluted the local waterway. Doesn't mean it's not the case, but it would be very difficult to prove. Katie, what was your comment?
Dog feces, not picking up other dogs.
Okay, you remember I'm the person that when I walked into the Office Depot, some woman came up and said, "You're Terry, aren't you?" And I said, "Yes." She said, "You're the dog poop lady." So you know you've touched a hot button for me.
Yeah.
Texas Commission on Environmental Quality is the state agency that's an arm of the EPA that is tasked with monitoring and reporting on water quality in all 191,000 miles of waterways in the state. One of the things that happens is the set of standards that are set for water quality in the state is reported online. And for those waterways that are considered of concern or impaired because of some specific level that's monitored, and the results are outside the standards that are set, you can go to TCEQ online and you can do a search for the 303D report and see every single waterway that's monitored, find out what the status of their compliance is. If there are concerns about anything, or if their waterways are listed as impaired for any reason, TCEQ in their infinite wisdom says the average human, healthy average human, can make contact with water in a waterway that contains 126 parts per million or less of bacteria. The reason we know for a fact that the bulk of the bacteria in our local right ear waterways is from dog poop is because after a rain event, people like Stephanie and Michael that are out there monitoring and have taken the extra step to get trained how to monitor for E. coli as the indicator bacteria, report that information in to Houston Galveston Area Council. They are this region's clean waters partner, and they publish those reports online. If you're persistent enough, you can poke around and find reports by the professional monitors as well as the volunteer monitors. But there are 5 people right here, technically in the township, who got trained in January 23 to monitor for E. coli in our local waterways. In these past couple of years, when the monitors have gone out to test for bacteria after a rainfall heavy enough that there was runoff, I've seen reports, they do it monthly, and I've seen reports go from around the 100 to 125 parts per million, all the way up to 5,600 parts per million. Once you cross that 126 parts per million threshold, the water becomes impaired for contact recreation. It's considered a health hazard, and you should not you should not touch the water. If you'll remember last summer, when they did that triathlon thing here in the Woodlands, and the swim across Lake Woodlands portion was canceled, it was because of high bacteria levels. There'd been rain, and the bacteria was so high that it was a health hazard to let people swim across it. So yeah, dog poop, yeah. Don't get me started, because I could go on for the whole next 3 hours. To my mind, that is a 100% solvable problem. Pick up your dog's poop and throw it in the trash. If you've been around me, you've heard me say how often walking down a pathway, you see that someone actually took the time to stop and bag up their dog's poop and left the bag on the side of the pathway for the dog poop fairy to pick up. Guess what? She's not coming. So, dog poop is a problem. Pick up your dog's poop, put it in the trash, even if it's in your yard, because even if the solid parts disintegrate, the bacteria, the viruses, the parasites that were in that dog's poop, they are still in your soil. In fact, if you let your dog poop in the backyard and you don't pick it up, I would strongly suggest you do not walk barefoot in your yard. There are some of those viruses like parvovirus. Oh my God, it can stay viable for up to 2 years. So, you know, you had a dog with parvovirus and it died. And 6 months later, you say, well, let's get a puppy. And you wonder why the puppy got sick. I could go on, especially about parasites. Oh my gosh, did you know, walking on places where dog poop was left, some of those are such microscopic things that they can literally migrate through your skin into your bloodstream and end up as parasites in your body. If you have a dog, it's your dog, it's your responsibility. Pick it up, throw it away, put it in the trash. How else can we protect waterways? Not overuse the water. Would it be helpful if, in addition to making sure that I don't pollute or contaminate the water, that I use a little less of it? Would that be a way to protect the quantity of water available?
Not only that, but also the quality of it.
Also the quality, yes. The more water there is, I'm sorry to say, the more dilute the problems in it are. You know, there's that old saw, dilution is the solution to pollution. Okay. Well, it's true because here's the thing, I'll tell you about Panther Branch. Again, as a result of local water testing by both volunteers, but especially that of the professionals that work for HGAC, over the past about 4 years, a really bad contaminant in Panther Branch has turned up, and it's cadmium, a known carcinogen, a really bad guy. Cadmium is a bad guy. It started showing up on the part of Panther Branch that runs from Old Conroe Road down into Panther Branch just before it hits the dam that makes Lake Woodlands. But over these past 4 or 5 years, it has been persistent enough that the most recent 303D report on that segment of the Spring Creek watershed lists it as a chronic toxic substance problem. Chronic toxic substance. It's still there. Where does cadmium come from? There are 2 or 3 different ways that it could be getting into the waterway, but the one that stands out in my mind, and I'm not saying this is it, but the one that stands out in my mind is the fact that cadmium is used as a binder to when phosphate is put into yard chemicals, especially cheap big box store yard chemicals. Phosphate is the binder to bind the phosphate to the inert ingredients as a carrier. And as the phosphate breaks down, it releases cadmium. Is there a really big subdivision that was built just outside the boundary of Jones Forest that Old Conroe Road runs through and that Panther Creek runs through?
You can help protect the waterways by planting native plants because they have the longer roots, a lot of them do, and it helps to filter the water down into, and that's less runoff that if you've got fertilizers and stuff. So it's actually being filtered down and helping to protect it and purify it and clean it.
Native plants are a huge part of protecting waterways. We won't get into invasive species, but trust me, you want native plants in place. That's what you want in place to help protect waterways. I'm looking for an answer about how to protect waterways that is especially, in my mind, important for master naturalists to think about.
Advocacy.
Even just a step beyond advocacy,
Education.
education. I mean, isn't that who we are? Isn't that why we're here? Yeah, it's about volunteering, but some of the other things we've talked about, would it be good for us to not just find ways to educate, but also model how to protect waterways? I mean, you know, Katie asked earlier about picking up trash. Well, if I'm out on the pathway taking a walk and I see trash, if I pick it up, I can't report that as volunteer hours, so why bother?
Awful good behavior.
But if I pick it up, I carry a trash bag with me. If I pick it up and I carry it home and I make sure it's in the appropriate container, is it a recycle item or a trash item? And somebody says, why would you pick up somebody else's trash? Is that a way to educate? Is that a way to advocate? Does that open a door for conversation? So there are some things in the manual in those couple of chapters that I think are important enough to talk about. Mike, I know we got a late start. You think I have another 15 minutes before we need to move on? Okay.
Terry, real quick before we move on, I'm trying to trace on the map Panther Branch, because I'm educating some of the mothers in my nature group about this particular substance contamination. And it looks like it starts right above Research Forest Drive, but it goes off the branch and then it leads right into Lake Woodlands, or does it go up further?
Well, you must be looking only in Woodlands Township. You must be looking at a boundary there because Panther Branch runs all the way up past Old Conroe Road.
Yeah, I'm looking at
It originates somewhere a little further north of that.
Okay.
And
And then
maybe it's called Panther, maybe look up Panther Creek. The name of it is Panther Branch, but maybe look up Panther Creek.
and then once it dumps into Lake Woodlands, it's so diluted that it's no longer.
When they test coming out, Panther Branch then continues south of Lake Woodlands and runs all the way into Spring Creek.
Yeah.
And yes, by the time it's passed through that large water body of Lake Woodlands, it's diluted enough that the traces of it that are there are no longer of concern. That doesn't mean it's not still in the water, but it's dilute at that point. But it's running into Spring Creek below Lake Woodlands.
And what about the test results in Lake Woodlands? Do those show abnormally high?
No, that's why I said that water body dilutes it enough, but
Has anybody ever tested like the turtles and the fish in the, when it's feeding into that bigger body of water to see if there's increased levels of this cadmium in those animals?
if that was gonna happen, it would happen by the professional monitors or by Texas Parks and Wildlife or TCEQ directly. I do not know whether that has been done. I'm sure you all know, if you have any interest in water quality at all, that the northern part shore of Galveston Bay, eating oysters and some of the fish is prohibited, and the caution is especially strong if you are pregnant or ever hope to be pregnant. But that started back in the late 80s and has persisted till now. But what's happened is that that's mostly dioxins, which is another carcinogen. That's the problem there. And they've tested the oysters and the fish, but it has, over these past couple of 3 decades, it has migrated to where that pollution is all the way into many of the tributaries that feed into Galveston Bay, to the point where in, I think it was 98 or 99, the same warning was issued for Clear Creek and still remains in place. If you're pregnant or ever want to be pregnant, you should not eat fish or other things, especially shellfish from, Galveston Bay, north part of Galveston Bay, or from Clear Creek. So I haven't seen those warnings anywhere for our waterways out here. I honestly haven't looked at Lake Houston to know whether there's any of that there, but I mean, you can go to TCEQ. When you go to TCEQ, if you want to check on a waterway, you put the name of the waterway first and the nearest identifying landmark or major roadway second as a starting point. You can expand out from there to take a look at what waterways might connect to the one you're looking for, and see what the reports are there. But so a couple of things. Back in chapter 18 that nobody but me read. Is where those agencies that everybody sort of glazed over and skipped. I think I'm telling you wrong. It's in chapter 9. So if you wanted to make a note and actually read those state agencies, it starts on 336 in your manual. But Texas A&M Forest Service, listen up. The mission of the Forest Service is to protect and sustain the trees, forests, and related natural resources, as well as water quality in Texas. Forests are critical to water resources. They prevent erosions. You had mentioned that how plants serve. Well, they prevent erosion, serve as a natural filter to remove pollutants. Forest Service programs enable sustainable forest utilization and associated water resource protection. Its programs promote proper forest management and demonstrate best management practice effectiveness. They provide technical assistance to landowners, further protecting the state's forest resources. If you own property of any, I think it's a 5-acre minimum, but you can call up Texas Forest, you can call up W.G. Jones and say, I have questions about management of the trees on my property, and someone will come out and talk to you about it. Texas Parks and Wildlife Department is charged with conserving the state's fish and wildlife, their habitat, and cultural and historical sites. Managing the state's fisheries equates to managing water quality and quantity, and they're actively engaged in water quality monitoring programs, pollution investigations, habitat assessments, plan for future aquatic species in Texas, and they provide countless technical resources to Texans and financial assistance where possible to protect critical habitats and species. So there's a lot going on with water in the state. I promise to read chapters 9 and 18, okay? Yes?
Yes.
At least a nod?
Yeah.
Okay. If you're interested in the water specialist program and you have questions, I am happy to answer those. One of the main things that we do, the collective we, who are, well, I'm going to use the word passionate about water, is learn ways to assess the quality of water. There are multiple ways you can attend trainings. Some require a certain level of training to reach a certification. Others are more about learning the ins and outs and the outcomes you're looking for when you're doing assessments. Michael brought along several waterways for you to look at today, and he's going to guide you through making some assessments. So he needs a few minutes to set up. How about 15-minute break? And then we will get started again.
Just a couple of comments first, just as she shows up.
Yeah.
I don't know if you follow news, but this week there was a big brouhaha up north of Austin with developments moving water around, millions and millions of gallons of water coming from one part of the area being shipped to another for housing development, retail, commercial development. This is an ongoing theme that's happening. It's Williamson County, I believe it was. There's also has been a bill introduced last legislative session where one of our representatives wanted to build a tunnel, a water, basically a huge water pipe from East Texas to West Texas. Sounds eerily similar to what went on with the Colorado River in Southern California and Arizona, where they essentially drained it dry. This goes on routinely. There's a couple of expressions in Texas. There's one expression, whiskey is for drinking, water is for fighting. And that is because of the laws associated in Texas. We have some of the
Convoluted comes
Yes.
to mind.
Yeah, they're very old, they're very convoluted. They're very much, if I own this piece of property, I own all the water that I can pull out of it. Unless it materially harms my neighbor, which is one of those vague,
Subjective.
subjective comments. So there's much going on. Just follow the newspaper, get on a blog and follow what's happening with water.
You don't have to go to Austin to see the issue that develops when development
Yeah.
affects the flow of water. If the people who live in Creekside Park of the Woodlands Township experience that firsthand, when all of a sudden their homes were underwater a while
We
back.
heard a lot from one of our speakers about some sightings down in Baytown where the whole neighborhood basically disappeared underwater. The other comment, you talked about the agencies. Just one agency I want you to go look at, the Texas Water Development Board. This is an agency you probably never heard of, that controls billions, tens of billions of dollars, and has a 50-year plan. That's what they're commissioned to do for water. It is mind-boggling the control that this appointed group of individuals has over the overall health and availability of water in Texas.
Some of those billions are used for loans and grants. Ostensibly to improve water conditions.
So it is a rabbit hole down which you can go very deep, very quickly. But it is critical because water is for fighting.
Yeah.
State. Okay,
15 minutes.
15 minutes. Very, very quickly, just a couple of announcements. For those of you who haven't met, but I think perhaps this is Kim. Kim is part of the training team. She wants to make a couple of quick announcements.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Sorry, I'm not with you for the whole day. I was saying my husband's competing in the Toastmasters contest that's in the next room over. So that's why I'm here, not in Massachusetts here. Two things I wanted to tell you about, some volunteer opportunities if you're ready to get some more hours. Usually you are. One thing that I'm very involved in is Friends of Lake Livingston. And that's a group that's a partnership with the Heartwood chapter and the Pineywood Lakes chapter that's in Livingston, as well as a lot of other organizations, Trinity River Authority. But that group takes beneficial water plants, and water is the topic of the day, so it fits right in. And high school students plant them along shorelines in Lake Livingston to prevent erosion, create fish habitat, create a better environment for the water. And there's always volunteer opportunities when Friends of Lake Livingston are having their events. High school students from the area schools will come out on a Wednesday, like a field trip day, and plant these plants in the water. And we always need volunteers to oversee them. There's water quality testing that's going on, macroinvertebrate studies. This is Wednesday, May 4th is the first opportunity. And so if you're available, it usually starts at 8 and goes until noonish. And it includes serving lunch to the kids, and you can stay and have a hot dog with the kids if you want to, but no requirements to eat those hot dogs, which I don't. And so that's the first one, May 4th. I submitted this stuff to be in the volunteer opportunities announcement, but I wanted to tell you personally since I'm very involved in it. And then the second one is on Wednesday, June 4th. Yeah, no, I'm sorry, May 7th. May 7th is the first date. I said May 4th. May 7th is a Wednesday. June 4th is a Wednesday. The special group on June 4th, it's not the area high school students, it's kids from Camp Hope, which is a program for abused students to be in, getting some nurturing, but they like to do fishing, and they'll also be building something called Georgia Cubes, which are artificial fish attractors. And so volunteers are needed to come oversee and work with those kids on that day also. So my email is my first initial and last name, K Lindenfeld, KLINDENFELD @gmail.com. And if you're interested, just email me. And then the second thing not that I'm super involved in this, but I'm going to volunteer on April 12th. You guys have a training class that morning, but Friends of Texas Wildlife has their annual event. I'm gonna volunteer there in the morning, and you could finish your training class and go volunteer for a couple hours in the afternoon. It's a booth, it's a Heartwood booth, while other groups are there presenting about their opportunities to help the environment. Thank you, Terry, for letting us
And
know.
over the years, there are a number of Heartwood members who have volunteered with Friends of Texas Wildlife. We're coming into lost and abandoned baby season for wildlife. And so they're doing trainings, you know, if you want to help with baby squirrels or baby raccoons or whatever other not many birds, there are a few birds, but I mean, it's a really good organization to volunteer with because they are trying to take care of native wildlife, especially, you know, babies whose mothers get squashed in the road or something, which seems to be the thing of the day these days is animals dead on the road. But anyway.
And if you come out to that, you can see what's going on. And the sign up genius is out there. It says noon to 2:30 or something like that. But if you wanted to finish your training class and then drive there, you could certainly get there later.
What was state?
It's April 12th. It's next Saturday.
And they're having it at their facility on 1488.
Yes.
So it's nearby.
Yeah, just remember you'll be coming back from Huntsville.
Yeah.
Oh,
But Kristen, Gerald, and I are gonna be there in the morning, and if somebody from the training class wants to volunteer, we'll stick around until you get there. It's not like it's, you know, like we have to leave at noon. So thank you for.
Just a comment about Lake Livingston. We've talked a lot of doom and gloom that's here. Lake Livingston is one of those success stories. Lake Livingston was declared dead a few years ago. That no life left in it. There was even talk of draining it, I think. And an effort was put forward by Friends of Lake Livingston and others to revitalize, and the lake has come back. Fishing has come back, the shoreline has come back. So there is hope. It can be done.
Yeah, and because it's a man-made, we probably
Yeah.
talked about the lifespan of man-made, you know, so in theory, there's a 100-year lifespan of man-made water bodies, and it's getting up there like
Yeah.
70 years or so now.
But Lee College Horticulture Program
Yeah.
also.
Yeah.
Has really taken on a big role in that project to guide the plantings and make sure that
And
it's.
part of that is through the Ellis unit in Huntsville.
Yeah.
The inmates go through a horticultural training. It's a 2-year, fairly rigorous program, but they come out of it with the certification as a horticultural tech, which gives them an in-place resume to go get a job.
And they grow the
Yeah.
water willow
Yeah,
on
yeah.
site at the prison that supply a lot of the plants that get planted in.
Yeah, the
Lake
majority
Livingston.
of them.
So
Yeah.
there's a lot of
It's
synergy going
a
on.
really nice, yes,
It's a good story, very good
collaboration.
story.
Yeah.
So that's May 7th and June 4th. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
I'm gonna
Kim.
go over to the toastmasters for that.
Right. Next, we heard about water, now we're talking about water quality. I'll talk for a minute and then we have an exercise for you to do. First, just some perspective. I heard, Deborah, was it you talking about conserving water? It's here's, it's a quiz, pop test, pop quiz. It's here. Typically, how much water do you use taking a shower? Take a guess. Gallons, 20 gallons. Depends on how long you stay in the shower. Depends on how your day has been, right? Typically 15 to 30 gallons.
How much?
Of what, 15 to 30? It's kind of a national average. Watering your yard. How much? Once a week, per session that you do it.
200 gallons.
Not too far, but 180 was the average they were talking about. This came from the EPA, so. And I would guess down here, that number would be higher, could very well be higher. Sidebar. Somebody was talking about fertilizer, over fertilizing. Terry taught me that you don't need fertilizer. Aerate and a 1/4 inch of top dressing twice a year, spring and fall,
Of compost.
high quality compost. I did that this spring. My yard is the greenest it has ever been. No fertilizer. I'm now an advocate for that. Washing the dishes. And this is actually washing, not sticking in the dishwasher.
Well, that depends on how you do it.
Well, it is a fairly broad range.
Yeah.
What do you think?
That's like 4 gallons.
Yeah. This is 9 to 20. It also, probably if you're really washing, rinsing, yeah, that's a lot.
Depends whether you leave the water running. while
Yes,
you're
when you
doing
leave the
it.
water. Washing your clothes. I think this number is, this number per is high, I believe. They said 30 gallons. Yeah. Yeah. Not
Per
near.
load?
I think per load, no, there's no, maybe per week. Washing the toilet,
Well, supposedly 1.6 gallons.
1.6, 2.8, depends on, you know, and in a day, you multiply that by every time people use it during the day. Brushing your teeth,
Well, that shouldn't be a gallon.
shouldn't be, but a lot of people who leave the water running, while they brush their teeth. It could be a gallon, and if you do it twice a day, easily. Drinking, just using drinking water. They say you should drink 64 ounces, that's a lot of water. This is half a gallon a day. Probably. If you add, you know, the coffee, the tea that you drink, the water that you drink, the ice that goes in it. These are some interesting. How much water do you think is needed to produce 1 ton of steel? There's no water in steel. But the process to make it. 1 ton of steel.
Don't forget, first you gotta go get the ore.
Yeah, this is the whole process. Extracting the ore, smelting the ore, making the steel, cooling the steel. It's a guess. 62,000 gallons of water. Now, some of that can be recycled, but a lot of it can't. 1 ton of steel. Doesn't take much steel to make a ton. How much, this is one that gets, how much is needed to produce 1 can of fruits or vegetables? Can of green beans, how much water does it take to produce a can of green beans?
Grow the vegetables themselves.
If you go through the whole cycle, yeah. 9.3 gallons. Every can, 9 gallons of water went into it. That,
That's even to make them aluminum.
yeah, all of a sudden you begin, And finally, I guess this is now, we should say, making a US car. Needed to manufacture a new car and its 4 tires.
Probably more than 1 ton of steel.
Not as much as 1 ton of steel, that's what surprised me. I guess because there's not a lot of steel left in cars these days. This is 39,000 gallons for every new car and tires, set of tires produced.
And then imagine the leather, right?
Yeah, depends on what the options are. I can't, I'd like to know what it takes to produce a 100% EV car. I'll have to look that up.
I want one.
What?
I want one question.
Okay.
So how much water does it take to produce that bottled water bottle? The bottle, not the water in.
Water in the bottle.
1.8 gallons of water to produce the bottle. And
Yeah.
we throw them away, not recycle, not the ones that are recycled. We throw them away at an average of about 30 million a day in this country. Thank you
there's a
for
little-
rating your reusable water bottle.
Okay, now, you've had your break, now a little exercise. Right out there are 9 jars of liquid. Your job as citizen scientist is using the resources available to you, which in this case are 2, which is sight and smell. Tell me what's in those jars.
Tell you what's in them.
Yeah. caveats, strong caveats. Don't touch the water. Don't taste the water. And if you're going to smell the water, waft. That means don't put your nose over the water. Then next to it and waft it. Now, scientists 200 years ago, they did taste and touch, and there were some bad results. So we're not going to do that. So you have, that should take you no longer than about 10 minutes. You go down both sides. They're numbered 1 through 9. Each of you should have a quality of water analysis. You can have a couple of flashlights. So get up and go look. Tell me what you think is in that jar. This is a flashlight that we'll use. Post-examination. Oh, good, look at this. You can go down both sides. I bet you can read the numbers upside down. 9s and 6s. Remember, waft. Yes, all 9 have different properties.
Found around your house?
Although I would.
Or depends on the house.
It depends on the house. And not all of them.
More broadly wave. Getting a wafting with us. Yes. Doing this doesn't always work. Yeah. Try to pull it. Hold it.
Hey, I know you do us. I mean, this is actually comes from a student.
Yeah.
The post discussion is very face to face.
Oh, no.
There's no grade on this test, so you don't have to. Yeah, no quick assessment. Right now, just identify. Yeah. And then we'll talk about. And then we'll go through and talk about the quality.
In that jar is similar enough that I. Okay. If you think we have stories of
I'm like, oh.
And by watching a nice series, you get a better sense if you pull it up. Instead of being close to this.
Did you use that?
Yes.
Use your recommendation.
That one. Yeah,
Yeah, it's I,
so, let me say one thing, because of the excellent thing. And I'm sure it's about changing the pH. But if the cramps are because of that thing, that lactic acid thing that happens in your muscles, maybe what it is it offsets that with a higher pH. Some people do drink pickle juice. Some, I've seen like little league teams who the coach has packets of mustard and they just squeeze it into their water bottle. Drink that. Yeah, exactly.
We're losing brain cells. I don't think I can afford this.
Don't just say that out loud.
you're, feel free to,
Service announcement?
this is, we're a collaborative group, feel free to collaborate.
Sorry for the,
Yeah.
group that comes in here afterwards. Where they are. Not gentlemen.
It's there.
Maybe.
Okay, I can't be a water specialist because I can't smell. I can smell it very much of anything on most of those.
You know what,
except for sure.
It's gonna be okay.
It's okay. We're gonna talk
It's
about,
all about the conversation.
the next part of the conversation will be about
Exactly
what
how.
water specialists do.
Okay.
And we're talking about somewhere else.
It just makes me so sad. Frustrated. When we already know what we know, we're still doing what is hurting us. It's like, how, and I know we have to start young with the kids to educate them, to get them to grow up to want to realize the importance.
Oliver Wendell Holmes, it's not so much where you stand, is in which way you're moving. And if you're not moving, and we're not moving.
I feel like I waited too late to start all this.
It's never too late to do
But
a
I
better
have done so
job.
much more if I started sooner.
But
I don't
doing
have much
something
time.
now matters. It does matter.
Yeah, education. I've got a garden club coming to my house in May to show them native plants, because I think, okay, you can tell them how important they are, but now show them how big they are. They don't look good in the yards. Tell them also all the why they need that, but I want to show them that, look at it.
There is a huge gap between knowing something and doing something about it. And I think that's
It is
kind
okay to
of
guess.
our
It is perfectly
whole
fine to
purpose
guess.
is closing that gap.
There's no,
I want to tell them
quiz.
one plant at a time, just add a native plant.
score, you know.
One plant at a time, you can do something by that. Yeah, Michael,
Yes.
can you get trained, with practice? Do you become better at distinguishing smells, or is that something that you're?
I don't,
You know, Terry, these,
for the,
can you become better at identifying smells, or is like you're born with it? and either
You know, I do an exercise with kids about how animals smell.
Yeah, I'll just wait.
And one of the things I asked them was, think about when you're getting like dog finish ready, what is he doing? He is licking his smell, he's licking his face, he's licking his nose. You think he's like, oh yeah, he is wetting his
Okay, one more
nose.
minute.
All of his receptors are in his nose.
They're all over your ear.
I'm telling you, if you wet your nose, you can smell better because those things that are in
The
the.
molecules.
Yeah.
Like when you're in the pool and you can smell everything around a lot better.
Because your nose is wet.
Yeah.
Maybe try that.
Try it.
I go,
Oh, yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
They still do that.
Online.
Yeah, I was, I'm doing
Water
it at the airport.
consumption.
Yeah.
And
I still always put on it, and they're like, oh, here, wait, let's get some coffee.
Oh, yeah.
They're giving me salt.
Yes. Just from our Zoom participants, two people pointed out, two of the more recent issues, crypto, coin mining, and AI consume huge amounts of water because of the tremendous amount of heat generated by the computers. They can recycle some of that, but you start recycling water, you start picking up elements in that water you don't want there, like heavy metals.
And I'm sure not all the countries.
Yeah. Okay. Any one or two quick general observations? Somebody had.
Harder than I thought.
Harder than you thought?
Yeah.
Good. I tried to make it hard.
For me, but I don't know if I got it right.
That's okay. Any other general observations about that?
It's hard to go off of visibility because you didn't, other than, you can't really tell the difference. What was suspended in the.
Yeah. You know, you look at it and you go, well, this lake water's safe. I can see all the way to the bottom. Maybe. Or my tap water looks fine. I'm sure the people in Flint, Michigan thought that for a long time. And it wasn't. Right.
And Michael, the other thing is that, it was all relative, so we had the group of three.
Mhm.
And that was really already providing maybe, some comparisons. But if
Okay.
you want to bring just one sample in itself, you're like,
Yeah.
okay, compared
Compared to what? Yeah, we had a comparison the other night. Anything else? You want to know what it is? What do you think number one was?
Water.
Tap water. Tap water from 139 North Mill Trace. Yesterday afternoon. It's there. Came from the San Jacinto River Authority and mud number one. It's good water, by the way. Number two.
Salt water or baking soda.
Okay, we saw something with it. Number two was actually sugar water. Not totally dissolved, but sugar was in solution in the water. Number three,
Like,
it's actually pond water. There's a little pond, Clover Park, down the street from my house. I pulled that yesterday afternoon. Who knows what's in that pond? Since there's, dozens of homes that drain into that area.
Actually, it's more like, it smelled to me something a little bit more fermented, if that was the
Yeah.
kind of.
Could be a musky. Number four,
That had a bad smell.
number four did, maybe the one next to it. Number four was distilled water.
Must've been the one next to it.
Number five,
Water.
it's actually salt water. There's a lot of salt dissolved in that water. Can't tell it by looking at it. Number six, vinegar. Water with vinegar. in it. Seven, seven is alkaline water, bought from HEB in a plastic bottle. Which is, in theory, if you listen to online influencers, alkaline water is supposed to be great. We'll talk about that. Number eight,
Water, yeah.
what? Seltzer water. Carbon dioxide is dissolved in solution in that water. And number nine, alcohol water. Yeah, the beginnings of a gimmick. It's there. So we've got all these samples. You were able to gather some from that. But for example, number one, tap water. Number four, distilled water. Number seven, alkaline water. You could drink all three of those right now as a human and be just fine. We'll talk in a minute though about what if I'm not a human? Can I drink that? So those are good.
What was number 8 again, please?
Number eight was seltzer water. Just basic carbonated water. I didn't want to do a Sprite or anything like that. I just plain old seltzer water. You could drink seltzer water. People do. They use it to mix drinks with. We could drink the sugar water. Some of us, type 2 diabetic, I don't want to do that. It's there. I don't know that any of us would want to drink the lake water or the pond water. It's there. We just heard it's of concern. Salt water in limited quantities, absolutely. Vinegar water, well, there's a lot of people, some of you in here may take a shot of apple cider vinegar every morning. Won't kill you. It's here, it's supposed to be good for you. I have some doubts, but that's okay. Alkaline water, I said you can buy that. Seltzer water and then alcohol water. If you do mixed drink, you probably take that. So now that we know what they are, what else could we have done besides look at it or smell it? What other? You could have touched it, could have tasted it. That's there. But let's go to, as a water specialist in Montgomery Walker County. What else would you want to know about that? What else could you find out about that?
pH.
The pH. Talk about that in just a minute. Yeah. What else? Is there anything else? I'm sorry?
Oxygen.
Oxygen. Good segue, dissolved oxygen that we're gonna do in just a little bit. We're gonna do more real citizen science. And test that. Anything else?
Bacteria.
The biological side. Who knows? It's the tap water, but who knows what's in some of the water that's there,
Especially the pond water.
especially the pond water. Anything else?
Other things that are dissolved in the water, I mean,
Yeah,
Dissolved solids.
the dissolved solids. Use a general category here. We could check first the conductivity. The more things that are in water, more minerals, elements, metals that are in water, the higher the conductivity of the water. And there is a scale to measure that.
Conductivity of electricity.
Yes, yeah, how does it conduct electricity?
Measures conductivity, measures total dissolved solids.
In fact, Stephanie and I both went through what's called the standard core monitoring training. And we have a site that we go to, each of us has a site we go to every month, and we do these tests. We don't do the bio tests, it's there, but we do these tests, and one of them is we test for the conductivity of the water, and we have a meter that we use to do that. So we're testing for those total dissolved solids that are in there. Anything else? That's right.
Contaminants.
Any contaminants? There are all sorts of specific tests, other tests that can be performed, such as up here, the test for E. coli. We don't do that. You take special training to do that.
What about temperature? Does the temperature of the water have any effect on its quality?
Absolutely.
So the wildlife living in the water.
We'll talk about it. Temperature can have effect on the pH in the day, during the day.
What about, I know we just learned that clarity is not, it's not the sole factor that you.
Mhm.
Determination of the health of the water, but that would be one aspect or arm of what you would look for, right?
Or the measures you could
Yeah.
use is turbidity, how, basically how clear the water is. Can you see through it? that's an important test when you're doing the core training on like a stream. You can actually do she can show you what that looks like. A couple ways to do it. So
For the bio, the E. coli, is that like looking on a slide, preparing a slide under a
I'll
microscope?
let Terry answer that because I haven't been through that training. I mean, I know they do it on a petri dish, but I don't know the details.
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
But that'd be another way to.
Yes.
That is the protocol for stream team.
As well as looking at it under a microscope. And according to Ace, I don't know if Ace is on the call or not, he got us access to the whole life sciences building next week, including the microscopy lab. So it might be worth trying to put something on a slide and looking at it. I don't know that I want to break Sam Houston's electron microscope. We won't go that far. All right, so there's lots of information that goes. One I want to talk about because it's a term we've all heard and we mentioned, and we talk about the pH. We hear pH, we read it on things, and I went off and figured, so what does that mean? I mean, I know there's acids, more acidic versus more basic alkaline. But and for some of you that have been through a lot, probably chemistry major in here, knows all this. 7 is neutral. This is what we would think typically water would be. It's not because of things that are in it, but that's a neutral point. And for those of you, I have to do this just for my own learning here. I want to put, and I want to do it right. Just so you can put in your notes to show that you truly are a citizen scientist. Here's the formula. pH equals negative log hydrogen ions. Measuring the relative amount of hydrogen ions that are in whatever aqueous solution. pH is you got to have water involved in pH. Is there at some point aqueous solution? Now, let's see what some things are. Chart. First, I'll read this because I haven't memorized it yet. The pH is determined by the concentration of hydrogen ions in a solution. Solution here. Everything here is in solution, or partially, at least some of this should do. pH is a negative logarithm of the activity of the hydrogen ions in the solution. Pure water, like distilled water, if it's really pure, is 10 to the -7th gram equivalents per liter. So it's in the middle. You heard 10 to the -7th? Well, the reason we put negative here, that's a negative sign, is to make this a positive number. So we can put that. So let's do some more guessing. Blood. What is the pH of our blood? Yeah, guess? Yes, sir.
Probably pretty close to 7.
Yes, it's pretty close to 7, 7.4. Which kind of makes sense. How about black coffee? We have some coffee.
More on the acidic side.
It's more on the acidic side, somewhere around 5. Yeah, depends on what else you put in it. Too. Yeah, it could be even more acidic than that. It's here. Liquid drain cleaner.
That will be on the basic side.
That's over here. So think about that as you put it down your drain and it heads to the water treatment plant.
And I hope if you were on a septic system, you're not putting it down.
I went to an online webinar, hour and almost 2 hours, about on-site sanitary facilities. Very, very interesting and revealing about how those work, why they work, when they don't work, what happens. Okay. Seawater. Seawater.
Like,
Closer to 8. Yeah, and again, depends on where you take the measurement. You know, whether you're near a source of pollution, but seawater is around 8. Just now, back to our little exercise that was here. Number 7 is retail available alkaline water. Anybody drink alkaline water? It's here. The pH listed on the front of the bottle, plastic bottle, was a pH of 9.5 or higher. So it's very alkaline water that you're putting in there. So that shows we have a pretty high tolerance. Stomach acid is down here. It's very acid, very acidic. So the pH of the water can make a big difference. pH can vary in a stream or a lake, a pond, time of day, temperature can change that, because as the time of day, remember there's what's happening in the water during the day is oxygen's being made, carbon dioxide is being released. At night, oxygen is being consumed. So the chemistry of the water is being changed by the sun, the temperature, the plants, the animals that are in there. So it can vary. It can move
The
around.
rain and the type of rain.
Yes, rain typically is a little more acidic. Now you get, those of us like me, they're old enough to remember acid rain, where it was down. Some of the acid rain on the northeastern quarter was down in the 4.3, 4.2 range. Still higher than it is out west, which is closer to 6 and 7. So you can imagine what acid rain could do to a pond. It's there. Speaking of that, now that we've got all these out here, let's ask. Tap water, good for animals? Not especially, depending on the chemicals that are put in, great, okay for us. But you typically don't pour tap water into your aquarium untreated. Why is that? Chlorine. And the chlorine will change the pH and put the chemicals in it. It's here. Alkaline water. Yeah, no, not particularly good for the animals that are around. Seltzer water? Wouldn't think so. They don't really have a way to take that CO2 out of solution typically. Salt water, well, yeah, 70% of the planet is plants and animals that use the salt water that have been adapted to it. But you don't put a freshwater fish in a saltwater tank. It's not for very long.
And you don't put a saltwater fish in
a fresh
tap water.
Yeah.
With salt in it. You still have the issue of the treatment chemicals.
So here's an example. Here's some information. There are different animals have different tolerances to pH. And there are some critical levels below which you're going to create damage. The animals won't survive. The critical pH level for snails is 6. You go below that, and life is not good. Clams are the same way. Bass, 5.5. So there's as you interject chemicals into the water, change the pH, you can change their environment. They're a little more tolerant because they can go lower. Mayfly trout is 5. Salamanders, about 5. Frogs are pretty adaptable. Their critical level below which you could begin to lose the frogs is 4. So they can be on fairly acidic environment, but even they have their limits.
So if we have our garden full of clayish dirt, a lot of frogs, that means that clay dirt that they're living in is more acidic maybe, or?
Yeah, it could be more acidic soil. That's right, I'm not a soil specialist. We had one of those earlier, could probably tell you, but the composition that was derived from when that soil was created with the water, yes. Okay. All of this was just a quick exercise to talk about what else, number one, why it's important to evaluate the water that's there. And for those of you that live in a MUD, municipal utility district, reports are generated every year about the quality of the water in your MUD. It's required. Some of it may only post them online. I get one in the mail. Suggest you go look at that and see what they're talking about the quality of the water. What's in the water, the tap water that they're delivering to your house. As well as the water that you've got your boat in, that your kids are swimming in, that you're eating fish out of. We heard that the quality of the water in the North Galveston Bay is beyond suspect.
I add just one thing that I think
Mhm.
missed when we're, so indicator species.
Yeah.
So indicator species, when we're going to evaluate
Mhm.
a waterway, to look for the indicator species for plants.
Yeah, and for example, when you go to a body of water, a pond, a lake, a stream, and you see a lot of leeches, there's an indicator that they're one of the few things that can survive at the edges. You know, a lot of times that's what's left when all the rest of the biologicals, we call them, are gone. So there are indicator species. Yes, exactly. That's a horrifying example that I keep in my head.
Do you have a water filtration system in your home?
I do not. Yeah, actually, the water that comes from Mud Number 1 and Woodlands Water and San Jacinto River Authority, it's actually pretty good water, I think. You know, they do a good job and keep up with the
What they
of what,
test
yeah,
for.
what they're required.
So if you understand that the pH level of aquatic ecosystems matters, why are we seeing both freshwater and saltwater ecosystems becoming more and more on the acidic side?
Temperature.
The chemicals that are running off into the water.
Things dying, does that change the pH?
Things are just
Carbon dioxide.
Say it.
Carbon dioxide.
What do we have in excess in our atmosphere these days?
Carbon dioxide.
Carbon dioxide. And when carbon dioxide dissolves in water, what does it become?
Carbonic acid.
Carbonic acid. changes the pH of the water. It's a huge problem that you hear a lot of talk about in the oceans because there are ocean species that are already in decline because the water has become too acidic. Sometimes they can survive, but they can't reproduce. And sometimes they can't even survive. But testing is revealing that the exact same problem we're having in freshwater ecosystems. We might talk about that a little bit more when we do our test here in a few minutes. But, you know, when the atmosphere touches water, there's a transference. So all of the stuff, not just oxygen, all of the stuff that's in the atmosphere ends up in that water that the atmosphere touches. So when there's excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, it transfers into the water body, salt or fresh, and dissolves. It's a problem for a lot of organisms.
If you read it, one of the solutions they have for removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere is by pumping it into the oceans.
Yes.
Extracting and pumping it into the ocean as a repository. At the end, if we have any time left, just for enjoyment, this is the pH meter that Stephanie and I use to determine the pH of the water that we're testing. Simple little test that we do. When we're done, if we have any time, if you'd like to hit a couple of these samples, we'll do a pH test on them just so you can see how it's done with this. I also have some pH strips. That's the other way you can do it, is put a drop on a pH strip and the color it changes. So
Not quite as accurate, but
No.
a good
it's a
indicator.
good indicator. So if there's time left, because the
Yeah.
real fun part is coming next.
How do you collect your samples?
Stephanie and I went through an 8-hour training session, and a large part of the morning session was how to collect the sample. And we do it via a bucket grab from the same point each time. And you have to practice the bucket grab. She won't pass you until you can get a good bucket grab that comes up out of the water. You throw the bucket with a string attached and pull it up, and you get a sample. And it always needs to come from either 0.3 meters or 3 meters deep, depending on the water, the body of water that you're doing. It has to be tested for temperature, it's tested for turbidity, and then we do a pH of dissolved oxygen and conductivity.
How do you sanitize the bucket?
We clean it afterwards I use ionized water. We go through and rinse it with ionized water. Deionized water.
But we also grab 2 buckets first.
Yes.
To kind of rinse the bucket of any residue that might be in it, and then discard the water away from the waterway.
Yeah, you always,
So by the time we take the actual sample, the bucket has been rinsed with the water that was in the sample.
you gather upstream, you throw it out downstream, so you don't disturb and change the turbidity. Anyone that's interested, when they do another class, it's one of the most interesting classes I've taken. And Kendall makes you do the testing 3 times in the class before she'll let you out of the class. And not only just do the testing, but actually get results that are correct. So, because you do a lot of validation as you do the testing.
Quality
Quality
assurance.
assurance. All right, so after we get started, I'll just close the.
Okay, I'm gonna give you 10 minutes because I need to get stuff set up. Michael, do you know where there's like a janitor's office? I sent an email, but I never got a reply. Someplace we can get water in these buckets, inside or outside the building?
There's a kitchen. Yeah.
Okay, and I brought a picture in case it push comes to shove, we have to get it a picture at a time. but I need these 2 buckets, each about half full of water. Then I need a couple of volunteers to help me get kits out and get gloves and safety glasses and stuff out. So, the rest of you let's take 10. Look around us. Are we all back?
I think so.
Okay, so Michael's been talking to you about being a volunteer water quality monitor as part of Texas Stream Team. When I, back 100 years ago, was certified as a water quality monitor, it was still called Texas Watch. But by the 2 years later, when I got certified as a trainer, the name had changed to Texas Stream Team, because apparently most states who have volunteer water quality monitoring programs refer to themselves as Stream Teams. So we are now Texas Stream Team. So the Meadows Institute, where are they, San Marcos? No, where are they? Yeah. They are sort of the state's overseer for the program, but locally, Houston Galveston Area Council is the Clean Rivers partner for the 13 counties surrounding Harris County. And they are the administrators of the Texas Stream Team volunteer data in that region. So once, as Michael said, it's a long day of training. In the morning, you run through how to do all the various tests, what the protocols are. Then they give you a lunch break. And then when you come back, you're tasked with being able to demonstrate that you were listening and paying good enough attention that on your own, you can ask questions, but nobody offers you any guidance. On your own, you can run through the battery of tests again. You have a lot of input as to where you monitor. I mean, you know, if I lived in South Montgomery County and they assign me a site in Galveston, am I likely to be really diligent about showing? No. So you have a lot of input. I mean, most people who come into the program already, you know, in my community, there's this waterway and I've noticed whatever, and I think I'd like to monitor there. Houston Galveston Area Council will look it up on the map, see if there are other volunteer monitors within a proximity to where your interest is. Look at the waterway itself to determine the necessity for testing in that waterway. They may ask you, well, would you consider working in that waterway, but could you move a little further downstream and test here? Because maybe there's a water treatment plant and they dump their effluent into that waterway. And so HGAC may want to know the quality of the water below that particular whatever, whether it's a drainage channel or a big conduit or whatever, after that effluent is dumped. There's a master naturalist who is, I mean, a long time, he's been monitoring almost as long as I have. He tests in Panther Branch above and below where Bear Branch runs into it. Because Bear Branch runs through an area which has a bunch of golf courses around it. And believe it or not, Bear Branch tests way differently from Upper Panther Branch. But that also is affecting to a great degree the part of Panther Branch from the point Bear Branch runs into it before it hits Lake Woodlands. So there's reasons for choosing sites, but you do have a lot of input into it. So the third test before you are certified to do this is once your site is assigned, the trainer, a trainer may not be the same one who trained you in the class, but a trainer accompanies you to your site, brings you a testing kit, and yeah, you have to collect the sample correctly. You have to demonstrate that you are clear on how to do the tests correctly. Most of us collect the sample and do the tests on site. And I'll get into an exception in a minute. We'll get to that. But there is an exception that you might be able to finish one part of it later. You do it well, you do it correctly, then the kit numbers is assigned to you. It's your site. You're asked to make the commitment to test at your site for a minimum of 2 years. It takes that long to see what your baseline numbers are going to be. I've had 2 monitors complain, why am I still testing here? I keep getting the same numbers all the time. Okay, that's what we want, is the same numbers all the time. It's the peaks and valleys that are indicators that something has gone awry in that water body. We want the same numbers. Whatever that baseline is what we want. For years, I tested right where Panther Branch drops into Spring Creek, down behind Montgomery County Preserve. I love that site. It was fantastic. It was a terrific place to be. There was a lot of wildlife sightings, as well as indicators of wildlife in the area. The water was fairly consistent in all the numbers. But the beautiful part about it, as a master naturalist, and you're going to hear me say this a lot to you, is either modeling behavior or educating others about what you're doing and why. And the site I was at was, if you've been to Montgomery County Preserve and you walk that trail, you know where it makes that curve, and you cross that bridge where trucks access that well that is an injection well where they dump whatever goodness knows they dump into that old well site. But people would walk across there to get to a site a little further down on Spring Creek to go fishing. Or they'd be just walking the trail to enjoy the nature there. I never tested there, not even one time, that somebody wasn't walking around and would holler, hey, what are you doing down there? Because they'd see my kit, they'd see my bucket, they'd see me looking at my gear, you know. Almost always, I'd say, I'm testing for water quality. They'd say, oh, well, how is it? And I'd say, it's actually pretty good. And they walk on. But some of you have heard me tell this story already. One day, this man, and I assume it was his son, this younger boy, were walking across. They had their fishing poles across their shoulders. And the guy said, hey, what are you doing? And I said, I'm testing for water quality. Well, how is it? It's actually pretty good. And I went back to what I was doing because nobody ever stopped. And the next thing I know, he's asking another question. Well, look, they have backtracked and they have walked over, and he asked a lot of questions about what I was testing for. And, you know, what do the tests mean? One of the things he asked was about fishing in the water and taking the fish home to eat. Sadly, I had to talk to him about bacteria levels. And in the end, they decided not to go fishing because they had been taking the fish home to eat. Okay, bad for him, but an opportunity to educate. Another thing that is important if you are interested in doing this is paying attention to what you're doing and how you're doing it, but mostly what you do with the product you're creating as you make the tests. If someone comes by and they see you dumping something out of the waterway back onto the sand beach, the whatever it is, whether they know what you're doing or not, there's a perception there. And you do have chemicals in front of you. Although in dilution, even in your sample bucket of water, you probably could put some of the product you end up with in that bucket and dilute it, but don't dump it at your site. I mean, we'll get to it in a minute, and these funky little containers that I've had you put around are our waste containers for today, so that when we get done, we're not taking this to the restroom to dump the product we create. I'll take it home. And that's what I think most of us do with our product that we create while we're testing, is we put it in a container to take home. If you live on a septic system, do not put it down the toilet or down the drain. But otherwise, I put it in the toilet and I flush like 3 times afterwards. There's not much else to do with it. Really, there's not much else to do with it. You don't want to put it on the ground, but you certainly do not want to do anything that, even though it may be okay for the environment for you to do it, it's perception. So it comes back to that, how you model your behavior. If someone asks you, you need to be able to say why you're doing it the way you're doing it and what you're going to do with this product you create during the testing. Would you have anything to add to that, Michael?
No, other than we were just talking about the same thing happening. People coming by, asking, what are you doing? Usually engages in a conversation about the quality of the water. My testing site, if you know, Bear Branch, the pool, the Bear Branch Rec Center, those of you that are from the Woodlands, tennis courts that are right off Research, just west of Boston, Shadow Bend. There's a site behind the tennis courts where the bridge goes over the bike path. And that's where I do the testing, which is also, I think, where one of the E. coli tests is. That's the test that they cite.
Yes.
For E. coli.
It is.
Is it Steve that does it there? I don't know.
Robert.
But they test there. I just do the core monitor. It's there. And then second test, just, this is not a test, but there's also a riparian assessment certification or qualification you get. So twice a year, a different site, I go to and do an assessment of the riparian area and turn that into HGAC.
The physical appearance of the waterway as another way to
That's only
assess.
twice a year.
Yeah.
Test, things don't change.
So it's a wonderful, really hands-on way to volunteer. But you know what I'm trying to convey to you is, it's not just about going through these steps to report the volunteer hours. And it can be so much more. You can talk about what you do. You know, if you're talking to your friend and you say, oh, I spent 2 hours this morning testing the water quality in this and this spring, or this and this creek, or whatever. Nobody's going to say, oh, that sounds interesting, and stop there. It's like, what did you do? Why did you do that? Opportunities. I mean, you can make your own opportunities by talking about what you do. But what does that mean for you? What does that mean for you if you're going to talk about what you do? You better know what you're talking about, and you better make sure that what you think is the reason behind it is correct. If you don't know, say, I don't know. Don't guess and end up inadvertently giving someone an incorrect answer to it. But oh my gosh, talk about it. Yeah.
How often do you go out and test those?
You're asked to monitor once a month, preferably for a minimum of 2 years. You're asked to always test about the same time a month, and for certain, this about the same time of day. So what would time of month have to do with anything?
temperatures for once.
Climate.
Rain,
Rainfall.
activities.
Time of month? Okay, most of us live in neighborhoods where somewhere, typically at the back of the neighborhood, near a waterway or a drainage channel, is a little mom and pop treatment plant, where all of your neighborhood's sewer lines converge to go into a treatment plant. Most of those are mom and pop shops. There's not even anybody there most of the time. It's a computer-driven process. Water comes in through the sewer lines and things happen. Typically, there are specific time periods where they release effluent into the nearest waterway. And in case you did not know that, that's where that effluent is released, into the nearest waterway.
Very. Is affluent treated waste?
Effluent. It's the, all of this flows in, it all gets treated. When all of the treatment is done, the sludge is removed and the chemicals used to treat have evaporated out of it, or it's run through a filter for that purpose, then the resulting treated water is released as effluent into the nearest waterway.
Where does the sludge go?
There's probably 10 different things that could happen with it. Most of the treatment plants in this area have a contract where there's a company that brings a big tank and they pump that sludge into the tank and carry it off to be made into fertilizer.
Yeah, that was a lot. I know.
Okay.
Oh, that's good.
I think it's another case for using compost instead of fertilizer, but you know, that's
There's
just me.
human waste goes into making commercial fertilizer.
Believe me, there are some stringent protocols for sanitizing whatever, ever. And we know that everyone who's regulated and has set protocols follows them to the letter. Right.
It's like you need a drink of that alcohol.
Right, like that.
Just as a- Terry got me to go on a tour of the Sanderson River Authority wastewater treatment facilities in the Woodlands.
The one that's on Sawdust Road.
It's on Sawdust Road, and just so you understand, if you're driving down Sawdust Road, so you're driving west-ish, you cross Spring Creek just before you get to the golf cart bridge that goes across the golf cart. If you slow down, if you can slow down and look over to your north or to your right as you're driving past it, you'll see a bunch of foam coming into Spring Creek.
A big open
In a big
culvert.
opening, that's where the effluent is dropped into Spring Creek after treatment. Or, they have 3 treatment plants, if I remember right, through the Woodlands. That's the largest of the 3. That you don't see it, it's behind a fence and stuff. There's a facility up there that does all of what she's talking about. And that was my aha moment when I go, that's where the water goes.
Well, since you've opened that door, talk about that first step we saw where they've got that gigantic machine that pulls up all of the solids that are not human waste.
Yeah, it was unbelievable, the kinds of things that end up making it through the sewer system. Just imagine anything that went down a toilet,
Or down the kitchen sink.
down the kitchen
Or,
sink,
yeah.
ends up there. So toys and metal pieces and,
Weird
yeah.
stuff.
And you're talking about what happens to a lot of this sludge that's there. They actually have a device that puts all the sludge in this upstairs container, compresses it, dries it, and then dumps it into dump trucks. It is, by the way, at least Sanderson River Authority in the Woodlands, so that's all I can say. in the midst of a renewal of some 50-year-old facilities. Initial facilities in the Woodlands were 50 years old. So you might imagine 50-year-old facilities probably prone to leaks. And we're talking about upstream of the treatment. So we're working on a huge, complete redoing of those facilities.
So what happens to all those toys and metal and all that that are in there?
Well, that's just a whole nother disposal problem that they have to deal with all the time. I mean,
I was impressed by the treatment facility.
It,
that they have.
it appears to be very ethical, the way they're dealing with all of this stuff. Seems to honestly be following all of the protocols for disposal of stuff, but most of what gets pulled out before it goes into treatment ends up in the landfill. Almost every bit of it. And it's a nasty mess of
And
stuff.
just for reference, all the storm drain water does not go through the treatment plant. It is dumped as quickly as possible into the nearest flowing body of water.
Yeah.
So no storm water is treated.
Anything that goes, if you live in a neighborhood where there's a swale in front, a ditch in front, or whether you live in a neighborhood that has curbs and gutters, all of that water, regardless of what's in it, that flows into a drainage, like a storm drain inlet or those bar things that are at the end of ditches, flows unfiltered, untreated, straight into the nearest waterway. We can talk about that more. So, testing water, assessing water by many different means is really, really important. Back in the day, we used to test turbidity with a Secchi disc. Anybody ever use a Secchi disc? It's in my opinion, inefficient and difficult to get accurate readings using. The disc itself is divided into black and white quadrants that you would stand at your site, whether you waited out or you're on a bridge or however you're getting to your site, and you first measure depth. And if you're lucky, the person ahead of you who had the kit had marked the rope with half meter and meter marks, but otherwise you're on your own. And so to test the depth of the water, which is one of the measurements that we make, you would slowly let this down until it touches the bottom. And then you have to determine in your mind where on the rope the surface of the water is. It's wet here and it's dry here. So this must be where the surface of the water was, and measure this to measure depth. And at one point, HGAC gave us these very cool plastic rulers, so they didn't warp when they got wet, that we could measure this. Or if the water was shallow enough, because you reported in meters, you could just step out and stick this down to the bottom and look on there, which was, in my opinion, better than trying to figure out where on the rope you were. But to determine turbidity then, what you would do is you lower it in the water until you just can't differentiate between the black and white quadrants. At that point, you slowly bring it back up until you just can differentiate. And then you figure out where the surface of the water is and you measure to see what the turbidity is. Not a very correct way to get measurements, honestly. It was difficult. Now, there are some places that you don't have any choice, especially if you're on a bridge and you're testing below the bridge, you have to use this. But if you're smart, you've marked half meters and meters on your rope, even if you just have to count how many you go up, whatever. But a few years ago, for those who were not testing off a bridge somewhere, they came out with a much better way. This is a turbidity tube, and the meter scale is right on the side of the tube. You can literally push this down and see where the water is on the scale, so you don't have to measure something else. And the Secchi disc is down in the bottom of the tube.
It's a plunger.
No, it's attached to the bottom. Can you see the Secchi disc in the bottom? So now what you can do is from your sample water that you grab, you can clamp this clamp so it doesn't run out, start pouring water in, and you pour water and you look until you can't differentiate the black from the white. Then you let a little bit of water out at a time until you just can. And then whatever the water level is, right there on the scale, you know what your turbidity level is. Problem is, nearly every waterway in our area is so shallow, you can see the bottom. So this helps you measure better than this, because you can drop that Secchi disc all the way to the bottom again and again and again, and you never have turbid enough water, almost never, to be able to gauge. But this, even though the water looks clear to your eye, I promise you, no matter if you can see the bottom, you start pouring it into this concentrated column, you're gonna find, I can't tell the difference between the black and the white. So it's a much more accurate way to judge turbidity. That is, again, it's not the conductivity, but again, it's about the solids that are in the water and their impact on aquatic life.
Question, excuse me. Is that water that you collect from your bucket that you've thrown and you pour it into that tube, or how do you not, like you had mentioned before, possibly wading into the water at something, if you're not off a bridge or something, to not stir up silt and stuff. And so many of our waterways are very silty on the bottom, that you're not compromising your sample looking at tube.
With difficulty.
Okay.
So when I was testing in Spring Creek down there in Montgomery County Preserve, I wore my I can get wet shoes, and I waited out the same number of paces every time. You're gonna collect, the water's flowing this way, I'm gonna collect this way, but then I'm gonna take a step, and if I'm in the water or if I can walk to the shore, I'm going to go downstream of where I'm testing to pour that out when I'm rinsing my bucket or for any other reason, so that I'm collecting this water, but I'm disposing of it when I'm rinsing downstream. One of the problems of taking the bucket grab is that shallow depth. The ideal level that you would take your water sample from is the midpoint in the depth. Well, the water's only this deep and you got a bucket this big around. Okay. So you want to break the surface with the bucket, because all water has that like one cell thick biofilm on top that's full of all kinds of stuff. You want to break the surface and you want to get midway down in the water column, but don't touch the bottom. With difficulty is how you avoid getting what you don't want or contaminating what you do want. Everything that it's just the water, you dump downstream of the testing site.
Are there different sizes of buckets?
Well, yeah, I had a much smaller bucket than this. Mine was a 3-gallon because my water was shallow, but still most of them are the same about diameter. If you're testing for E. coli, in fact, they've gone to using a little bucket about this big, and it's a dark blue color. Okay. Because you don't care what the color of the water is. The reason we use white buckets is to determine the color of the water. Because that's one of the things you have to fill out on your form.
When we're talking about educating, say, the public, so when you had somebody walk by you at the drink and are asking, how is the water? How honest are we being with that, without creating mass hysteria? Because like you mentioned, cadmium and stuff is in the water, so if I see moms walking around with kids splashing in these.
So within the parameters of what you're testing for, I would say 99 out of 100 times, the water is within an acceptable range of preferences for water quality for aquatic habitat. But like I told the guy who actually took the time to stop with his son, who was gonna go fishing, I talked to him about, one of the problems we have in our local waterways though, is this high bacteria. So, but be clear. If pet waste is left behind after a rain heavy enough that there's runoff, that bacteria is now in the water. And EPA, not just TCEQ, EPA says it is a health hazard. So
How many days after a heavy rain?
I have seen results from the 4th day after a rain when the E. coli results were still in the 300 to 500 parts per million. We used to have this sense that if there was a big rainstorm and there was runoff, it's going to flush everything into the waterway, but by next day should be back to normal. That's not the case. It takes a while. So
One of the things here especially, just because it didn't rain at your house, it could rain half mile away, heavy, and that all gets flushed down. So one of the questions actually on the form is, has it rained in the last 3 days?
3 days.
And
Well,
how much?
yeah, so we're kind of getting in the weeds here a little bit, but so when you're answering what is the rainfall for the previous 3 days, unless you live within a quarter mile of your testing site, or you've been there within the previous 3 days to know that, you leave that number blank because it matters whether there's been runoff or not. If you don't know, don't guess, because as Michael says, if it rained at your house, doesn't mean it rained there. Yeah.
To Katie's question still, I'm curious too, because I wouldn't want to be an alarmist, but my facial expressions give a lot away. And like she's saying, I mean, what if that day you're testing and there, whatever you're testing, it's like, oh, and someone does ask you.
So what you're testing for on here, if you say, well, the oxygen levels are a little low. So there may be some, you can say there may be some conditions in the water that are affecting the amount of oxygen, which is bad for aquatic life. Or you can say, well, we're in the middle of really hot weather and heat affects the DO. We'll talk about that in a minute. You can say what you know based on the testing you're doing, and you can explain why you're doing those tests. But unless you've gone through several levels of additional trainings and certifications, you're not testing for E. coli. But if you want to say, one of the things that our local monitors are aware of is after rainfall, there's high levels of bacteria in the water. So you could say to them, you might want to use caution in wading or swimming or touching the water for a few days.
Now, there was that one area that had the high cadmium, and I remember you had mentioned, do not swim in this area, or did I make this up?
So cadmium is a bad guy. In the water, it's a bad guy. You certainly wouldn't want to ingest it.
Is
The upper Panther Branch above Lake Woodlands all the way up to Old Conroe Road is where
And
that
it
cat,
also drains in, like Peach Creek.
Lake Woodlands,
Yeah,
Lake Woodlands.
so. What about, Peach Creek is great.
Peach Creek is, well, the Peach Creek I know of is on the other side of the freeway. Yeah. I don't know if anyone's testing for E. coli there. You could get onto HJC and dig around and see if you can find out that. So back to getting certified, you've got to demonstrate that you know how to do the testing, do the collecting, do the testing, do the disposal, clean up your site, make your observations. There's a whole bunch of observations to make about the site, whatever, ever. But when it comes to the test, nobody will ever ask you to memorize how to do these tests, and you have to demonstrate you know them without help. Part of your packet is a cheat sheet. How to, step by step, how to do each and every test. And I encourage all monitors, old or new, always have your cheat sheet, because I don't know about you, but my brain is getting old. And, you know, if I went down there to test and I start to do this multi-step DO test we're fixing to do, I might want to check myself. Which one do I add first? You know, so there's a cheat sheet. And I'm going to show you another reason that you want this with you all the time in a minute. So, questions?
Somebody posted online that there's gonna be a stream team training on April 22nd.
Where? Houston? Yeah.
Find it on the stream team.
Kendall Gidrose has, they were trying to find a date and time we could do a string team testing out here this spring, but here's the problem. There's only one person at HGC who manages all this data from all the monitors. She tries to limit how many new monitors every year are in any given area, simply because when you submit your data, she has to go through everything you submit with pretty much of a fine tooth comb to do an initial quality assurance assessment of it before she incorporates it into the data. So we weren't able to find a good time. I'm hoping that by fall, we can find a spot with her to do a class out here in Montgomery County. But typically that class is limited to 10 people, because most of the classes are limited to 10 people, because she can't, you know, 50 people starting to monitor all at the same time. She doesn't have the bandwidth to properly manage all of their data. So they do 2 to 4 trainings a year, and they try to move them around in different areas so that everybody gets a chance to do it. We did, last time we did the training was September before last. Yeah.
So is there a need for new monitors, or am I overwhelming the system with my good intention of becoming a monitor?
We ask people to monitor for at least 2 years. And while there are a handful of folks who have been monitoring for as long as they've been alive, most people do move on, retire from monitoring after a couple of 3 years, maybe 4 years. So there's always openings. Right now, if you looked at the map on the HGAC website of all the volunteer sites, I'd be willing to bet of the 400 and some sites, I'd be willing to bet there's probably 100 that are not currently being tested.
So it is worth it.
It is worth it. It's definitely worth it. All right.
And some of the people that go through the training don't ultimately volunteer at one of those sites. They're doing it as part of their job. We had people in our class that were part of SJRA.
Yeah.
That this was required that they get this certification for their job.
I trained Shane Simmons, who is the water quality monitor for SJRA a few years ago. Yeah, he came through that program. So we're at 11 o'clock, and this is going to take us about 45 minutes. So we're going to jump into this. I'm going to show you what I want you to do step by step. I mean, what's the main principle of scientific method if you want to compare, contrast, or collate data? Everybody has to do it the same way. So today you're doing it my way. This is the quick and dirty version. We're not doing all the 2 rinses of everything. We're just gonna do the testing. But I promise you, especially from last Saturday, we all were very consistent in our findings. So it's still gonna be a very good idea of how this program works. But I'll show you what I want you to do, then I'll ask you to do it. Don't jump ahead of me. Don't jump ahead of me. So the first thing we do is get our water sample. Look in your kit and find a sample bottle that looks like this. What's in this bottle right now? What's in the air? And what are we measuring? Oxygen. So we don't want to measure the oxygen in this bottle. We want to measure the oxygen in the water. So first thing we have to do is fill this bottle completely with water. Here's how you will do it. Don't make me come over there. So we'll open the bottle. I'm going to put it straight upside down in the water, below the water level. I'm going to turn it to the side slowly. It's going to go glug, 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 glug. I'll give it a shake, make sure there's no air bubbles in there. While I'm holding it under the water with my other hand, I'm going to take the cap, put it with the open side up, put it under the water, give it a couple of shakes, make sure it doesn't have any air bubbles in it. And under the water, I'm going to put the cap on the bottle. When I take it out, I will slowly turn it to the side to make sure there's no air bubbles in that water. And then I'll be ready to start doing my testing. So watch me do this and listen. Straight upside down in the bucket. Listen. Give it a shake. You heard all those air bubbles. Cap upside down, under, give it a shake. Lid on, bring it out. You need paper towels at your workspace. We are going to get wet. And then I'll slowly turn it to the side to make sure there are no air bubbles. Thank you. Dry off your hands, dry off your bottle. Go back to your workspace. So there's 2 buckets. No shoving. If you're partnering with someone, take turns doing things. We have a lot of steps to go through.
And you've got 2 TAs here.
Okay. Eyes on to make sure that they are following instructions. I need you to have a really flat on my hand.
Okay.
You go to Broken School.
Move quickly, guys. Take turns, take the next turn. Do it quickly. We've talked more than we should have.
We're talkers.
We are talkers.
Master specialist of Texas. On its side or upside down?
You turn it straight up.
Straight up.
All air.
Well, it's straight up.
Straight upside down to start and slowly turn it to the side.
Okay.
So that the air bubbles can flow out. If you've got an air bubble, you have to go back in the bucket and do it again. Turn it to the side, look for air bubbles, turn it to the side.
You can turn it straight up.
Should end up with it straight up, with the open side up, under the water. Give it a shake to make sure there's no air bubbles in it. Turn it to the side now.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I can monitor. and see
Turn to the
what-
side, look where you're going.
So we actually-
Do the water specialists do a lot of outreach or is it more field?
That was so Texas water specialists volunteering for recertification can be virtually anything that is related to water in any way. A lot of them do litter audits, litter collections and audits. A lot of them work on invasive species, especially near waterways. You know, it's a mixed bag of all kinds of things to do, but volunteering, as Michael said, because he's a water quality monitor, that's his recertification hours. Okay, guys, we all got water samples?
Yes.
All right, we're gonna start using our chemicals now. If you do not have on gloves and glasses, you will not open the chemicals or I will come over there. And believe me, I'm not playing. Gloves and glasses. If you wear glasses to see, you don't have to wear the safety glasses, but I encourage you to.
And on the form, when you're actually doing this for real, on the back, one of the things you have to check and certify that I wore safety glasses and gloves during the execution of this test. If you don't check it, well, then you've not followed the rules.
All right. The first thing we're gonna add to our water sample is manganese sulfate solution. It looks a little pink in the bottle. Take it out of your kit and watch me. This will be how we'll add all the reagents to our sample. I'm gonna take the cap off, pretend I've done that. I'm gonna take the cap off my water sample. I'm going to turn the reagent bottle straight upside down so that I can very clearly see the drops and control them with slight pressure on the bottle. I'm going to hold near the opening to my sample bottle, but do not
¿Se
touch.
escucha ahora? Ok. Se me quedaron sin batería, se quedan sin batería enseguida.
Do not touch the two together because contamination. We don't want to contaminate our reagent or our sample. So slightly above, and I'm going to add 8 drops. Watch me do this. So straight upside down. Eight drops. You notice I moved it away. That last drop that fell out did not go in the bottle. Once you hit 8, move the bottle away. So if any more comes out, it's not going in the bottle. Cap on the reagent back in the kit. Any questions? Add 8 drops now.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I'm wondering if.
Do you remember where?
1, 2,
It's a similar thing.
All good? Everybody good? All right. Now find the alkaline potassium iodide. It's clear. Look, it might just say alkapot on it. Yeah. And we are going to add 8 drops. So add 8 drops. Now our sample bottle was completely filled with water and we're adding more liquid. So what's gonna happen? It's gonna overflow. You better have paper towels at your workspace. Work over the paper towels. All right, somebody tell me what's going on in your bottle. So we had a color change. What else?
See some particulates falling out of the water.
So this is essentially the first step when water goes into a treatment plant. They add chemicals that cause the solids to clump together so they can fall to the bottom. Who knew tap water here have this many solids in it, but there you see these solids. So listen to me. We gotta put our cap on. If you look at your bottle, you can see the water already is a little bit of a bubble above the top of the thing. It is gonna overflow. Be on your paper towels. Okay. Put the cap on. Anybody know what you call those solids that are all coming together, clumping together?
Particulates and suspension or suspension.
It has a real name. Stuff. It's called flocculate. Flocculate. All right, now the next step is to mix it well. But if I say that, is everybody gonna do the same thing? So here's the way we're gonna do it. Hold the bottle. We're gonna invert it 25 times. It'll be 1, 2, invert 25 times. Sure. All right, now, so without disturbing your sample, we want to watch, and what's gonna happen is those solids clumped together are gonna start falling to the bottom. If you will, pay attention to the shoulders of your bottle here, and we want the water to be clear to right below that shoulder level. If you can see through with this white background behind me, you can see up at top, mine's already clearing up top. And it will continue to clear. Now, if your bottle is on the table and you're looking down on it, that's gonna be harder to actually see. So you either need to lean down to look at the bottle from the side, or without disturbing it, lift it up so you can see. All right, so if you look at mine now, see mine is already right at the shoulders clear. So I'm gonna let it clear just for a minute more.
Terry, are you going to talk about what was pulled out of the water at some point?
That's solids, that's just
What specifically those?
minerals and any other stuff like that, dissolved minerals, dissolved solids.
We're meant to specifically pull something out.
Those two chemicals we put in cause solids to clump together, and so they can fall to the bottom. All right, so see, mine is now nicely below those shoulders. We are going to invert 10 more times. All right, I'm gonna tell you exactly like I tell the 5th graders that I work with. We're gonna let the solids settle below the shoulders again. And when it does, we're gonna be adding sulfuric acid. Do not make me come over there. We will open it, use it, and put it away the way it's supposed to be used, carefully, back in our kits. We're not gonna fool around. One day I was working with 5th graders, and this one little girl kept saying, "Miss Terry, I can't get it open." I leaned over to take the bottle to open it, and just then she got it to break open, and she was squeezing it so hard that it squirted sulfuric acid all over the front of my shirt, which was absolutely fine until I washed it. The minute I put it in water, a zillion holes opened up in the fabric of my shirt. You don't want it. You don't want it in your eyes. You don't really want it on your skin, and you certainly don't want it on your clothes. It is a moderately dilute sulfuric acid, but still, we will use it carefully and safely. So in just another second or two, see, mine is below the shoulders. I'm gonna open my sample bottle. I'm gonna open my sulfuric acid and guess how many drops I'm gonna add? 8. 8. Do it. You want to try? Now our bottles are very full again. It is gonna run over and we put the cap back on. But somebody tell me what's going on in your bottle now. Did you see another color change? Yes. And what is looking like it's happening in there? I mean, what does sulfuric acid do? It dissolves stuff, right? So the idea is that the sulfuric acid is going to dissolve all those solids that are in there, so we end up with a clear sample. Believe it or not, we have done this test in settings like this with tap water and could never get all the solids to dissolve, but that's rare. But out there in the real world, in your stream where you're testing, there could be times when all the solids do not dissolve. So here's the way we do. Michael, can you set a timer for us? At this time, instead of counting inversions, we are going to invert for 3 minutes. And then we'll see whether we still have a lot of solids. If we do, we can continue doing inversions, but we kind of top out at a maximum of 10 minutes. Trust me, if it hasn't dissolved in 10 minutes, it's not going to dissolve. But usually, most of our waterways, 3 minutes is sufficient. So tell us when you're ready to start.
Is everybody ready?
So start inverting. Go ahead and start the timer. We're going to do this for 3 minutes. So while we're doing this for 3 minutes, somebody tell me how oxygen gets into the water. Plants, photosynthesis. So that earlier conversation we had about atmosphere touching the surface of the water, there's a transference there. The agitation really promotes that transfer from the atmosphere. Rain. As water falls through the atmosphere, water attracts water. So is it glomming on to other stuff? And oxygen is one of the things it's glomming on to as it falls. That's why when your neighbor down the street built that cute little koi pond and they put that little fountain out in the center, it's like, wasn't just for cute. As that water is shot up into the air and then falls back through the atmosphere, it's grabbing onto extra oxygen. So it's aerating the water. That's why you put the bubbler thing in your aquarium. How does oxygen get out of water?
Yeah, algae. They're taking oxygen.
Heat.
What are you saying?
Well, fish and aquatic.
Aquatic life. And you're saying that algae and plants take oxygen out of the water? Okay, wait a minute. During the day when the sun's out and it's all photosynthesizing, life is great. Plenty of oxygen in the water. But at night, when those plants and other vegetation, algae cannot photosynthesize, that's why plants put oxygen out there. It's so when they can't photosynthesize, they have it available to take it back in. Why we worry about an abundance of vegetation. Why those chemical fertilizers that run off into the nearest waterway matter is they promote growth of vegetation within the water, the same as they do on land. And you end up with an excess of plants during the day. Life is good, everybody's got plenty of oxygen, but at night, it's problematic. So you end up in a situation, I've personally been there at waterways. Fish are not the brightest bulbs on the tree. It's like, oh my gosh, look at all this vegetation, all this food. I'm just gonna be happy here, I can eat all day and all night. And the sun starts going down. Okay, you can stop inverting. The sun starts going down and the fish are having a little trouble breathing. I have been there and watched fish just before sunup, and they are at the surface of the water with their mouths out of the water, trying to suck in some oxygen, but their gills aren't made that way. And by the time the sun comes up, you have belly up dead fish because there wasn't enough oxygen. Those dead zones, they're called, but it can happen in smaller areas, in waterways and lakes and ponds. Another way that oxygen gets out of water.
When the water warms up, it creates a faster,
As liquids heat, as liquids warm, they lose their ability to trap gases. And what is oxygen? So, best time to test if you're a monitor is in the morning. But if you have to test in the afternoon, always test in the afternoon. Otherwise, if I'm testing at 9 a.m. and then I go at 3 p.m., I'm going to get a totally different reading, aren't I? Because the water is going to have lost oxygen. All right. So now we have, well, what do we have? Is this a solution or a mixture? Why?
Because everything's dissolved.
I can't take anything I put in there back out, can I? It's not like in the bucket of water we had, I could put dirt in and make mud, and I leave it sitting till all the water dissolves. I still got the dirt, right? That's a mixture. This is a solution. It's fixed now, which means you're at your site. You've done your other tests, you're doing your DO, and here comes the rain. Now that it's fixed, you could in fact leave this open to the atmosphere for 4 to 6 hours, and it's not going to affect your final reading. So that means you can pack up, you can go home, and you can finish this at the kitchen table. The next thing we have to do is a titration. So you need a vial with a cap that looks like this. In the real world, if we were doing this for real, there's a lot of rinsing and whatever that goes on here, but we're doing this quick and dirty.
Terry, can I ask a question? Why is it fixed after you put the chemicals in, but it's not considered fixed just by grabbing the sample out of the stream?
The chemical life in the water, everything we added is going to be affected by time and exposure to the atmosphere. And if it were open, if the vial were open, it'd be affected by the atmosphere. It's a small opening, but still. So yeah, so things will begin to be, what's the word I was searching for? Not as potent after time. All right, on your vial, if you have a vial with a single line, it should be marked 20 milliliters. If you have a vial with several lines, find the 20 milliliter line and listen up. I don't care how you pour out of this bottle into this vial, it is going to spill. Work over the paper towel and slowly and carefully pour your sample into the vial so that the meniscus is at the 20 milliliter line. What is the meniscus? So the surface tension on the sides of this column make it look like the sides of the water are higher than the center. I want the bottom of the meniscus on the 20 milliliter line. Go slowly, because if you put too much in, it's the devil trying to get just a tiny bit back out. So slowly. Gotta put on my glasses, make sure I can see what I'm saying. Oh. All right, when you've got that in there, tightly cap your sample bottle. We hope we're done with it, but tightly cap it, and listen to me. When you put the lid on the vial, listen. Hear that snap? Listen for that snap. Find the bottle marked sodium thiosulfate and find the titrator, which looks like this. If you pull the plunger, the green part down a little bit, look at the tip of the green plunger. You see it has that long rounded tip, and then there's a flat surface, which is that disc that creates the vacuum as you pull the plunger out and in. What we're going to do, if you look at this, there's a scale on one side. Down here toward the bottom, when it's upside down, is the number 0. So watch me do this. When I open my thiosulfate, there's a handy dandy little cap with an opening. Hold the titrator near the tip, push it into the bottle. Listen to this, turn it upside down, pull a little bit into the titrator, and then quickly expel it to get rid of any air bubbles. And then pull down until that flat surface is on the 0 line. So let's work quickly and do that.
And what?
Trisulfate?
Thiosulfate.
Yes.
The ring part of the flat or the tip?
No, the flat surface near the tip, that disc that creates the vacuum, line up that disc with 0.
The 0, okay.
You see how mine looks? All right, this next step is important. I'm going to hold it near the tip. I kind of like to almost, it feels like you're unscrewing it out of there so you don't jerk it out. And listen, you insert it into the cap opening on the vial. Do not touch the green plunger. Do that. All right, to start our titration, I'm going to add 1 drop at a time. 1 drop. Thiosulfate is the only thing that touches your titrator. When you're rinsing all your other stuff before and after, you do not rinse your titrator. Thiosulfate is the only thing that ever touches it. So we're not shaking this, we're not inverting this. We are swirling this to mix it. I'm going to drop, swirl, drop, swirl. And what I want is pale yellow. Okay, is your pale yellow my pale yellow? I don't think so. So I always suggest to new monitors, wait for me guys. I always suggest to new monitors that maybe you go to the paint store somewhere and you go to the yellows and you get one of those little strips that has some shades of light yellow. And after you've done this and you kind of know what your pale yellow is, that on your cheat sheet is this big white area. The way you look at the yellow is not with the window with green behind it or up in the air with someone's shirt behind it. You look at it against a white background, hold the paper away so you're getting white light bounce back. So something white. This is a good pale yellow. So if you will, it's a good pale yellow. It's a good starting place. We do not want to keep adding till it goes clear. So stop somewhere in this range and add drops, drop, swirl till you get to pale yellow. Do that now.
I'm always concerned, is this pale enough yellow? Is this the right?
Well, so Saturday, the only two guys in the class worked together as pairs, and the first thing they did was go clear. And then they wondered why their number didn't match anybody else. I'm sorry, guys, but that's just the facts.
How long should we swirl in between drops?
So the idea is to make sure it's well mixed into the solution. And you'll see why more in a little while, but if you swirl it, if you do this, you're good. And this is the yellow I want you to get to. This is the yellow I'd like for you to get to. No lighter than this. It's perfect. I hope you're prepared that we might run a few minutes over.
Very close.
You can add one more drop. I need white behind it, please. No, one more drop. One more drop. You're good. You're good. You're good. You're almost too light. You're good. Okay, stop there. All right, now, we've got to add another thing in here. But I don't want anything that comes out of this titrator not to end up in here, because this is a direct reading titrator. What does that mean?
The measure that you, the number that you see is the measure.
I'm gonna read the answer right off the titrator. So whatever answer I get, I wanna make sure that it's because whatever came out of here ended up in here. So here's how I'm gonna do this, eyes on me. Top the cap open, but hold it to the side so that the tip of the titrator is suspended above your solution in your vial. I should have opened this first. Get your partner to open your starch sample, your starch indicator. And what am I gonna add? 8 drops. All right, now look what happens. You see those clouds? Listen up, guys. When you put your cap back on, listen for that click. See those clouds in there? Here's where the swirling is really important. You want to swirl until every bit of that liquid is the same color throughout. Don't leave any little dark clouds in there.
This isn't coming out of here.
Okay, well, here, use mine. Okay.
I was worried that maybe I'm squeezing a flood.
This is the hard.
Did you say swirl?
Swirl until all the liquid in there is the exact same color. Oh, okay, well, I don't know what it is about the starch indicator. Sometimes it gets a little clogged in the tube. All right, guys, we're working quickly now. We'll continue our titration with drop, swirl, but again, every time you drop, you're gonna see clouds of the purple. You wanna swirl till it's all the same color, drop, swirl, drop, swirl, drop, swirl, until it goes clear. But see, if you can see this, you see there's still some blue hazy clouds in there. Make sure it's all the same color, but also make certain that there's no hint of blue. If you've got any hint of blue, add one more drop and swirl that. The water needs to be completely clear.
Terry, we weren't supposed to record the number before that.
No, we filled it to 0 before.
Wow.
Keep swirling till there's no clouds. And if it's completely clear, stop adding drops.
Carrie,
Mm.
when is your next cashew party?
I'm sorry,
When is your next cashew party?
cashew? Okay, you know, I'm crazy about cashews. So I buy those containers. It takes me a couple of months to eat them all, but yeah. But they're the perfect thing for waste containers, really.
We use them as stockings.
There you go. All right, we all clear now? Everybody's clear?
So if we see anything purple.
Anything purple, hold it against the white background. If there's any purple, it's still got to add another drop.
We need another drop.
Okay, guys. Now our titrator is the other way round, so that the 0 is now at the top. And we're reading the numbers growing larger as we go down. Look for that flat surface that you lined up with 0, the flat surface nearest the tip. If you notice between the numbers, there's hash marks and each one is 0.2. But your answer does not have to be a multiple of 2. If it's between 2 of those marks, look, figure out what odd number it is. So read from the number above that flat surface plus however many little hash marks or partial half marks. I think it's 7.
We're reading from the bottom edge of the.
The flat surface nearest the tip. Okay, what did you guys get? 7, 4. 8, 6. What did you guys get?
7.8.
7, 8. What did you guys get?
17 is how many?
0.2. 7.4. 7. 8, 1. 8, 1.
I think we ate one. Hold on, does it?
You read it from the top down, so it's the number above. So it's 8, 4.
7.4.
7, 4. Okay. What number did we want?
Yeah.
The right
one.
What is this test for?
This is for dissolved oxygen. This is the oxygen in the water. What number did we want?
7.
So most aquatic organisms in freshwater ecosystems prefer to live in water with an oxygen range between about 6 and 9. So are we all good? Absolutely, yes. Of course, they can't live in the tap water, but if it were from a stream, we would all be within range. Why didn't we all get the same number?
Or drops bigger or.
Could it be just human, not necessarily error, but decision-making about, did we drop one drop too many, or did we squeeze the bottle harder?
They get the yellow stuff.
Shade of yellow.
And
There should be a difference between who took the water first, who took it last, because we're introducing oxygen into the buckets when we're releasing it from our bottles.
so when we filled our bottles, you remember when it went glug, 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 glug? What was in that bottle before? Oxygen. And did it go into the water? Yeah. So the first person who took sample might get a different reading from the last person who took sample, and then there's this. This set of chemicals costs about $120. I'm sorry, but when we're doing just talking about it, demo trainings, I use expired chemicals. That could possibly be a factor, but our numbers are so close in range. I feel as though we got accurate readings so that we know what the oxygen level in that bucket of water was. There's also the fact that when Michael and Stephanie went to fill those buckets, they were pouring the water into the bucket and did that aerate the water to a degree too. So, but nonetheless, out there in the real world, if we were doing this for real, between 6 and 9 is good. Sort of the same as with pH levels. The lower the oxygen level goes, the more problems exist. As the numbers fall through 6s and into 5s, some organisms can survive in that water, but maybe they can't reproduce. As it falls through the 4s and 3s, we get to a point where not much can live there. Our friends, the leeches, are probably a good example of someone who can live in both low pH and low oxygen. Everybody's gotta be someplace, I guess. And leeches are good indicator species. What I need you to do now is expel the rest of your thiosulfate into the container, put the titrator back into the kit, take the sample bottle and the vial, open them up and go to one of the waste containers and empty them in there and put all the equipment back in the kit.
While you're doing that, when Stephanie and I go do this, we actually do 2 bottles. We do two samples. We do
Each
one,
or one each.
I mean, we do 2 water samples. We complete one that you just did, and then we do another one, and we compare the 2. And they have to be within a certain tolerance for it to count. Otherwise, you either have to do a second bottle or you have to start all over.
So that was one of the things I was gonna mention to you, is that this is not your final answer if you're doing it for real. There, you get a second bottle, you keep this one, you get a second bottle, you do the exact same thing again, and then you average the 2 answers. But if your 2 answers are more than 0.5 apart, you dump it out and you redo the test. Now, this is all you have. This sample, this solution is all you have. So if you have to dump this out and do it again, 2 more bottles, that's one reason why you want to treat this carefully. But if you do it a second time and your 2 tests are still more than 4, 5 apart, you dump this out, you rinse your bottle, you rinse your gear, you go back to either to your bucket or to your source, and you start over again. One of the downsides of if you get caught in that rainstorm and want to go finish this at home, and you don't get good answers, you may have to go back the next day and do it again. But, all right, where's one of those? You can put the gloves in the trash. You can put your safety glasses back in the bin up here. If you've got everything tightened up, I don't want to get home and find out that some of my chemicals got mixed together, so please make sure all of the chemicals have good caps on them. No, that's what Michael was talking about earlier. It's a whole suite of things. If you are interested in knowing all the tests that are done, here's the form. Here's all the observations. Here's all the tests you do. And the front sheet is sample answers that you should arrive at. So if you want to look at this, I have some more of these as well somewhere. I'll make a copy from you. Thank you. Hang on. Somewhere here, I have some of those.
Anybody that wants to stay after extra credit and would like to see the pH test, it's a very quick test. I brought both.
Anybody want to look at the test? The actual report? You want to look at the actual report? Anybody else wants one? I still have some. I'll take one. Take one.
Online somewhere.
Yes, if you go to HGAC, go to water, go to Texas Stream Team, you can look at it or download it online.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was interesting, there is you can report this online now. You don't have to fill out the form, but Kendall Idros is who we turn our forms in. She asked for us to scan it and send it to her. She will.
Thank you, it's great to
into the system.
Well, also, even if you do intend to report it online instead of scanning it, and turning this in, it's good to have this with you to make notes as you do the testing, so.
I tried to go back and look at the previous month to see if there was a significant change, to note that on my comments. I'm trying to figure out why.
Now, it sounds like, Michael, you two go in pairs and Terry, it
No,
sounds
we go,
like you
no,
work.
we go individually.
Oh, you go
She has a
individually?
very different site than I do.
Okay,
We went through training together and both master naturalist and.
but you did the testing
But
individually.
we check with each other. If you had trouble doing this,
Yeah,
how did you do that?
buddies,
So if you have questions, now's the time. I promise you I'd be done with you by noon, so.
What are some typical sizes of waterways that they want you to test? Like, we've been talking a lot about creeks and streams, but do they get as small as, say, like the gullies that feed into the creeks? And
There is one person who tests in that Bear Branch drainage channel, but it's a very large drainage channel. And there is one person who tests at an outfall from where two large drainage channels come together over in the Woodlands Parkway, Kirkendall general area, and those drainage channels flow through two different golf courses. Oh my God, the numbers he gets.
Yeah.
And where I test at Panther Branch, it's not a particularly wide part of Panther Branch, it's continuously flowing.
Yeah.
And it's about half a meter deep at the deepest point and probably, I don't know, 5 meters across.
Yeah.
So,
like we have a gully called Taylor Gully that runs through our neighborhood. And it's relatively small, but it's large enough to sustain fish populations and turtles.
And it is pretty much flows year round.
Yes.
Okay,
There's
that's
always
one of the main
Yeah.
criteria. I mean, they will let you test in areas where sometimes it's not full flow, but it has to be most of the time have flow.
And the reason I ask is that, we do have people that go and fish in
Yeah.
that area,
Yeah.
so it might be good to.
Yeah,
is it in
have a
Montgomery County? Or
That's in Harris County.
Harris
So
County.
it's
So,
right.
yeah, that would be a site that Kendall would be the person contacting,
Yeah.
that's the
And then
area.
you go and check which sites are taken.
You can suggest to her where you would like to
Uh-huh.
test. She will make sure. They don't like you to test within, say, like a quarter mile of each other,
Mhm.
because you're not gonna get really effective information about what runoff might be happening
Yeah.
if it's too close
Mhm.
together. So I think it's about a quarter mile that they suggest. be.
She
I've
said
got-
they have a lot of abandoned sites, meaning nobody's doing, that if it's close to you, you want
I've
to
got a
try to-
lot of, I live by Spring Creek.
Yeah.
And.
Yeah.
And
And so
sidewalks.
if
I've
they
got a
have
lot.
historic data from a specific site
Mhm.
and you are in that general area, they may ask you if you'll test at that specific
So
site.
you can just provide a general area and then direct, instead of providing a specific site, you can provide like, I'm in this
Right,
area, and they can direct you to the
Right.
best point.
exactly.
And they'll give you like the lat long.
Yeah.
That you can walk to and know
Yeah.
your exact spot.
Any other questions?
You have any experience testing the water in rainwater harvesting tanks?
So, not a lot. What most often happens is you see that the screen or whatever is filtering the water as it goes into the barrel isn't fine enough. And you end up with like organic matter, bits and leaves and soil and stuff that washes off a roof or whatever ends up in there, which can affect. But by and large, you don't really see issues, because if you tested the rainwater directly and then you test what's in the rain barrel, it's mostly gonna be affected by decomposing organisms that are in there for that detritus.
Leaf litter and stuff like that. And how harmful is that, or is it?
No, it's not. It's not.
So as long as you don't have mosquitoes or other.
Well, even if you have mosquitoes getting in there, that's not gonna necessarily be damaging if you're using it to water gardens. But it would be annoying when they emerge and wanna bite you, so.
I have a remote cabin in the woods and I use it for hand washing,
Yeah.
flushing the toilet.
Yeah.
I don't
So
drink it.
what you could do in that case is elevated enough that you could put up some kind of little filtration on the outflow spigot.
I have filters.
Yeah,
I have
so
filters.
that you're not getting the mosquito larvae on your hands or, you know, the bits and stuff. Also, the spigot is just a little bit above the very bottom of the barrel. So usually any little sludge or stuff like the detritus tends to collect below there.
Yeah, my water intake is from the middle of the tank, actually.
Yeah.
It floats.
Well, there you go.
I mean, I don't use it for drinking water.
No, you wouldn't, please.
Do you eat fish, oysters?
Do what?
Do
Do
you
I?
eat fish and things? I
Okay,
don't
the short
in a
answer
way.
is no. I mean,
Yeah.
I grew up being a fish eater. We fished every weekend and we ate fish. I'm sorry to say, I don't eat any local fish. I wouldn't do it either. Too many bad guys in the water anymore. Actually, if I was gonna be really honest, I think there are very few things available to eat in this world anymore that are as safe as, 79 years ago when I was young. So, we have what we have. I mean, what water sources are you using to water? I was saying this the other day in the class that they're now finding nanoplastics in soils that have migrated into plants. When they tested corn, it's in the corn. My nanoplastics are in the corn. The nanoplastics are in unborn babies. Okay, so what are our choices? We get what we get. Good luck.
MasterCard.
I was just saying, this is what my facial expression
Yes.
would be.
Yeah.
You're doing so well, you're like.
Yeah. Good luck. Good luck, really. And as our drinking water is safe based on criteria.
Right.
But what don't they test for and treat for? 20 years ago now, some organization went coast to coast in the United States to test in the major cities to test the drinking water. They thought they would find some places where the bacteria was too high or things like that. They did not. But what they consistently found, every single city, these major cities, they tested the drinking water. They found birth control, hormones. They found other pharmaceuticals as well, but they found birth control hormones. They found pesticides. But that's not tested for, nor is it treated for in drinking water. And we wonder why so many young couples have to have help to conceive. Thank you for being here today. Love you.
Sorry,
Thank you.